My name is Alara Vance, and I had built a life that most people only saw on magazine covers. 4 weeks ago, I was not just happy. I was operating at the absolute peak of my meticulously structured existence. I was marrying Liam Hayes, a man who radiated success, charm, and an almost magnetic ambition. Our partnership wasn't just romantic. It was a perfect architectural blueprint of shared city success. We lived in a stunning, minimalist penthouse on the 40th floor, all exposed concrete, glass, and curated art. I, as the principal of a thriving interior design firm, had ensured every surface, every angle reflected success. Liam, a senior consultant in the fiercely competitive renewable energy sector, was the perfect complement, the polished face of finance and foresight. The wedding, scheduled to be held at the historic Bellwether Vineyard Estate, was not just a party. It was a societal event, a merger of two powerful personal and professional networks. The guest list topped 300. The dress, a bespoke silk gown, was hanging in a climate-controlled closet. The florist was finalizing the complex arrangements that cost more than a small car. Liam, however, was perpetually absent. He was chasing a ghost of a deadline, a supposed high-stakes merger that had consumed his life for the past 6 months, intensifying to a fever pitch as the wedding approached. "Babe, you know how it is," he'd drone, rubbing his eyes, his voice rough with manufactured exhaustion. "This is the big one. It's crunch time with the APAC division. We close this, and we're talking 8-figure bonus. Then we can finally start those 2 years of actual honeymooning we planned." I was designed to be independent. My pride wouldn't allow me to be a clingy fiancé. I told myself his dedication was a virtue, a testament to the future wealth he was building for us. I convinced myself that the smell of stale coffee and printer toner that clung to his expensive wool suits was the scent of commitment. But the absences were becoming less excusable. He missed the final cake tasting, claiming a mandatory video conference with Sydney. He delegated his attendance at the rehearsal dinner, planning to his best man, Marcus. Even our dog, a ridiculously spoiled golden retriever named Charlie, seemed to regard Liam with suspicion, offering only a single lazy tail thump when he finally stumbled home at 3 a.m. I tried to bridge the gap. I brought takeout to his office one evening, a sleek, modernist co-working space downtown. I texted him that I was coming. When I arrived, the suite was dark. The security guard, a polite man named Frank, confirmed Liam hadn't been there all day. When I called Liam, he answered instantly, his voice strained. "Alara, what a surprise." "I'm so sorry, babe, the meeting got moved last minute. We're at the CEO's private residence in Greenwich, super sensitive." "Oh, right. Okay," I said, my voice flat. "Just thought I'd drop off some sushi." "I love you, you're the best. I'll be home late, maybe tomorrow morning." I drove home, the untouched sushi carton sitting on my passenger seat like a cold, tangible lie. Greenwich wasn't an hour drive. It was a universe away. The excuse was plausible, but the pattern was starting to feel less like a demanding job and more like a carefully constructed wall. My intuition, the same sharp sense that guided my design choices, was screaming. But I muted it with logic. Liam is too successful to risk everything for something so cheap as a brief affair. The scale of the lie had to be proportional to the man. I didn't yet know just how vast that scale was. The warning signs were everywhere, not as dramatic thunderclaps but as persistent, annoying static in the pristine signal of our relationship. My maid of honor, Maya, who understood the rhythm of our life better than anyone, was the first to voice the unease. We were having our final spa day, manicures, massages, the works, a tradition she insisted upon to combat the wedding stress. "Look, I love Liam," Maya said, her voice dropping as the manicurist worked on her nails. "But the consulting world is tough, not impossible. No merger, no matter how high stakes, requires a grown man to be unreachable for 72 hours straight, 6 times a month." "It smells like a lie, Alara." "It's the bonus, Maya. He's obsessed. He wants the summer house free and clear," I insisted, gripping the armrest of the massage chair. It's temporary ambition. It's 10 years of temporary ambition, she countered gently. You've been together 4 years, but he's been running this grind for longer, hasn't he? It's his origin story. That night, alone in our 40th floor apartment, her words echoed. The silence felt enormous. Liam was gone again in a data review session in Newark. The next morning, I noticed the stain. A faint, reddish-brown smear, tiny but noticeable, on the inside cuff of his bespoke shirt. It wasn't coffee. It wasn't wine. It smelled vaguely like rust, or perhaps some kind of cheap, rural soil. It was definitely not from a Newark server farm. I didn't let the anxiety spiral. Instead, I channeled my fear into a surgical quest for data. I was an investigator, not a victim. The physical evidence came first. The receipt. Liam returned at 2:17 a.m. I heard his muffled movements, the soft click of his briefcase, the slow glide of the closet door. I stayed still, breathing evenly, feigning sleep. The smell of wood smoke, that faint, crisp scent of pine and burning oak, was stronger this time, mixed oddly with the institutional aroma of gas station air freshener. When he was safely in a deep sleep, his breathing heavy with exhaustion, real or feigned, I couldn't tell. I slipped out of bed. I found the receipt tucked deep into the inner pocket of his tweed overcoat, the one he wore for his supposed country site visits. Hickory Creek Mercantile. Time, 7:45 p.m., Tuesday. Items, bottled water, chips, propane refill. The receipt was longer than I remembered, noting the propane refill, a damning detail for an office worker. Location. The printed address was for a remote town in the Poconos, far north and west of the city. My quick Google Maps search confirmed the horror. 203 miles away. A 5-hour round trip plus a 5-hour workday was impossible. He hadn't been working. He had been living somewhere else. I felt a dizzying mix of panic and cold clarity. This was not a quick hotel tryst. This was systemic. This was time. The final piece of the puzzle lay in the briefcase. The next day, after Liam left for his 9 a.m. global strategy meeting, I retrieved the worn, leather-bound notebook. It was a utilitarian black, unlike the sleek aluminum-cased one he used for work. I opened it, forcing myself to ignore the tremor in my hands. The lists were there. November check-ins. November 2nd, dentist, 10:30 a.m. November 6th, game night, pizza movie, must be home early. November 15th, parent-teacher conference, 6 p.m. December 4th, hockey practice pickup, J. December 18th, birthday party prep, theme, dinosaurs. The chilling, undeniable truth was in the details. J. Dinosaurs. Liam was deeply woven into the fabric of a child's life. A life that wasn't mine. I realized the handwriting wasn't just different. It was Chloe's. The same flowing, intimate script that covered the pages of the notebook was the same handwriting I had seen on a thank you note, years ago, when Liam's mother had briefly dated a woman named Chloe, who lived upstate. Liam had dismissed the note as an old family friend's pleasantry, but my mind's computer, having been fed the data, just returned the catastrophic match. The realization that Chloe was the key, the mother, the other life, connected the pieces into a perfect, terrifying whole. I had to move from detection to investigation. I carefully photographed the receipt, the notebook, and every page with suspect entries. I put everything back precisely where I found it. I had to know the location. I had to find the geometry of his second existence. My days immediately following the discovery became a masterclass in controlled duality. I continued to plan the wedding, smiling at caterers and discussing linen choices with a vacant but convincing enthusiasm. I even went to my final dress fitting, standing still in the pristine silk, feeling like a ghost inside a beautiful, empty shell. But beneath the surface of the perfect fiancé, a deadly strategist was awakening. Liam, oblivious, continued his pattern, his texts now feeling like performance art. Just reviewed the prospectus for the 100th time. Tired but getting closer. Wish you were here. I needed to know the physical location of Hickory Creek Mercantile, and more importantly, the end of the line for Liam's commute. I couldn't risk following him in my own highly recognizable luxury car. The next afternoon, I fabricated an emergency work meeting in a remote part of the city and drove to a nondescript strip mall 2 counties away. I walked into an electronics and hobby shop, deliberately choosing one that dealt in surveillance equipment. I bought a tiny, high-powered magnetic GPS tracker, the kind designed for asset recovery. I used my burner phone to register the device and paid in cash. The act was cold and functional. It felt less like spying on a loved one and more like confirming the location of a hijacked shipment. That evening, I waited until Liam was showering, singing some awful corporate jingle he'd picked up. I put on surgical gloves, the ones I used for handling delicate art pieces, and crept into the garage. His metallic gray sedan gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The tracker was small, no bigger than a matchbox, and powerfully magnetic. I crouched low, breathing in the scent of oil and concrete, and swiftly affixed it to the rear axle, tucked high into the chassis, where only a mechanic would ever look. The screen of the burner phone immediately displayed a blinking blue dot. Liam Hayes sedan, currently stationary. I washed my hands, removed the gloves, and returned to my life, the knowledge of the blinking blue dot now a cold metallic anchor in my soul. I slept soundly for the first time in a week, not because I was comforted, but because I had reclaimed control. I had data. The very next day, the plan began in earnest. Liam announced his 48-hour bunker session with the CFO in Boston. It's a nightmare, Alara. Private jet to Boston, then locked in a conference room until Friday morning. Wish me luck. He kissed me quickly, his lips dry and hurried. I watched him drive away on the tracker app. For 2 hours, the blue dot moved south and east, the typical route to the airport. I was almost convinced. Maybe he was actually going to Boston this time. But then, the dot stopped. Not at the airport gate, but at a long-term parking lot miles away. 10 minutes later, a different vehicle, Liam's old, battered, unregistered pickup truck that he claimed to have sold years ago, pulled out of the parking lot adjacent to the sedan. It began moving north, the same route that led past Hickory Creek Mercantile. The private jet to Boston was another lie. The bunker session was a 5-hour drive to a secret life. I waited 3 hours. I needed to let him settle into his alternate reality. I needed the cabin's silence to be broken by the casual sounds of living, not the sounds of arrival. At 7 p.m., I made my moves. I called Maya, spinning the migraine and locked in my office story, making it sound entirely convincing. I withdrew a large amount of cash from an ATM miles away from my apartment complex. Then, I rented a completely nondescript silver sedan, miles away from my home, using a different credit card and an alias, a small but important detail for the paper trail. The drive was agonizing. It was a study in paranoia and pain. I drove conservatively, keeping the tracker open on the burner phone mounted to my rental dashboard. I used the main navigation only for directions, but the truth of the journey lay in the small, moving blue dot. For 5 long hours, I drove through the night. The city lights disappeared, replaced by the heavy, black expanse of the countryside. The interstate became a 2-lane highway. The radio faded to static. My thoughts were a chaotic torrent of memory and fury. The day we met, was he already living this life? Did he flirt with me knowing he was already a father? Our proposal. He proposed on a Venetian gondola, a romantic spectacle. Was he thinking of Chloe then? Our dog Charlie. He had insisted on adopting Charlie, claiming he'd never had a pet. Was Charlie his way of recreating the family pet he was too absent to enjoy with his real children? The physical distance gave me time to process the sheer scale of the deception. This wasn't a reckless one-time mistake. This was a parallel existence built with the same energy he claimed to be dedicating to me. Every late night, every canceled date, every exhausted sigh. It was all a transaction of time and emotion, stolen from me and delivered to them. Around 11:30 p.m., I passed a familiar sight. The blinking, solitary neon sign of the Hickory Creek Mercantile. I slowed down, the sight of the shabby little building a monumental validation of my worst fears. He wasn't stopping for a quick coffee. He was confirming his supplies for the long weekend. I exited the highway 30 minutes later, the roads becoming smaller, narrower, and darker. I felt an electrifying coldness take over. The Alara who drove into the woods was not the same woman who had left the penthouse. The fiancé was gone. Only the strategist remained. The tracker led me deep into the wilderness. The last turn was onto the barely visible Pine Ridge Private Rentals logging road. I pulled the rental off the main road and hid it among a dense cluster of pines, using a tarp I had foresightedly packed to cover the windshield and reflective surfaces. The air outside was piercingly cold, smelling of damp earth and thick pine resin. It was a primal, unsettling environment, far removed from the sterile predictability of our city life. I checked my attire. Black leggings, thick-soled boots, and a heavy dark gray hoodie. I pulled the hood tight over my head. I looked like a thief, or perhaps a hunter. The walk down the dirt path was tense. I kept my breathing shallow and my steps light, navigating the uneven terrain by the light of the crescent moon. After 10 minutes, the path curved sharply, and I saw it. The cabin. It was small, rustic, and built from rough-hewn logs, clearly meant for rugged weekend escapes. A plume of white smoke drifted lazily from a stone chimney, and a single rectangular window glowed with a warm domestic light. It was the antithesis of our glassy, high-tech apartment. It was home in a way our apartment never was, grounded and permanent. Liam's pickup truck was parked around the back, exactly where one would park to minimize visibility from the road. I crept to the edge of the clearing, hiding behind an enormous, centuries-old oak tree, its heavy limbs providing perfect cover. I pressed my body against the rough bark, the cold seeping through my clothes, grounding me in the reality of the moment. I peered through the window. The curtains were thin, cheap gingham, offering little privacy. The scene inside was achingly normal. Liam was in the center of the room, not in a suit, but in a faded flannel shirt and work jeans. He was setting up a small electric train track on a braided rug. He looked relaxed, genuine, and utterly unlike the tightly wound corporate figure I knew. Sitting at the wooden kitchen table, drinking from a chipped ceramic mug, was the woman, Chloe. She was beautiful, yes, but in a natural maternal way. She wasn't wearing makeup. Her dark hair was tied back carelessly. She looked like a woman who didn't need to try. She simply was. And then the final devastating confirmation walked into the frame. A little boy, maybe 7 years old, wearing dinosaur pajamas, stumbled in, rubbing his eyes. Liam immediately dropped to one knee, a smile of pure, unadulterated fatherly joy lighting up his face. "Hey, buddy. You're still awake? Come on, let's see if we can get the engine to run before bedtime." The boy, Leo, crawled onto Liam's lap, his small hand reaching up to touch Liam's stubbled cheek. My vision tunneled. Leo is 7. That meant the lie was already 3 years old when Liam and I met. I wasn't the victim of infidelity. I was the unknowing mistress of a married man, recruited into his plot to legitimize his financial ambitions. I reached into my pocket, pulling out my primary smartphone. I double-checked the recorder settings, making sure the sensitivity was maximized. The fury had solidified into a cold, lethal resolve. I slid against the cabin wall, positioning the phone against the wood, directly beneath the window frame, ready to absorb every syllable of the confession I knew was coming. The soft sounds of domesticity quickly faded as Chloe ushered the boy, Leo, off to bed in an adjoining room. The door closed, and the silence in the main room became thick, strained, and filled with the pressure of 10 years of lies. Liam rose and began pacing the narrow floorboards, the movement agitated and restless. The sight of him, his casual posture, the comfortable way he moved in this space, was more cutting than any tuxedo. This was his real self, worn smooth by years of genuine intimacy. "Chloe, he's getting too smart," Liam said, his voice low but audible through the thin wood. "He asked why I don't use the phone with the bright screen here. He asked why I say mommy to Alara's dog when I'm on the phone with her, and not to you." Chloe walked over to the wood-burning stove, her movements slow and deliberate, the weight of the years heavy on her shoulders. The smell of burning wood and coffee was almost unbearable. It smelled like the stolen life I was now inhabiting from the outside. "He misses you, Liam. And honestly, I'm tired of being a secret. I'm tired of canceling Christmas dinner because you have a mandatory retreat that is really just sitting in our apartment, pretending to answer emails for Alara," Chloe retorted, her voice a low, steady drone of resentment. "The wedding is in 3 weeks. We agreed. You tell her now." Liam stopped pacing abruptly, his voice spiking with panic. "I can't tell her now. Are you listening? The merger closes Friday. The $5.3 million bonus wire transfer is scheduled for Friday morning. If I drop this bomb before the transaction clears, Alara's legal team will tie up every asset I have. She's not stupid, Chloe. She has a prenup, and while it protects her firm's assets, it has a clause, a non-disclosure clause regarding marital liabilities. If she proves I hid a primary family or significant liabilities, she could take almost everything we've jointly accumulated since we met. Non-disclosure clause. A detail I, in my professionalism, had insisted upon to protect my own business assets, was now the weapon I needed to wield. Chloe scoffed, turning to face him. "You keep saying jointly accumulated, Liam. Let's be clear. The cabin we are standing in right now, the land, the truck outside, and the initial investment that launched your firm 10 years ago, all came from the trust fund my father left me. I signed those documents with you, trusting that you were only stepping away temporarily to make a name for yourself. You didn't just meet Alara and fall in love. You met Alara and saw a faster, easier path to the top. She was your corporate ladder. The truth hit me like a physical blow. The money he claimed to have used to start his high-flying career wasn't even his. It was Chloe's inheritance, which he had used to fund 2 lives, one of which was an elaborate, polished lie I had been living in. He hadn't just betrayed me. He had stolen from his family to finance the lie. Alara is the means to the end, Liam repeated, trying to regain control. She introduced me to the VC firm that funded the merger. Her social capital closed this deal. Once the money is secured, I end it. Cleanly. The conversation took an even darker turn when Chloe questioned the timing of the planned confrontation. "And you still think crashing the wedding is the best move?" Chloe asked, her arms crossed, her eyes narrowed in doubt. "Why not just call her from Boston like you originally planned? The emergency retreat ending in failure?" "Because of the optics, Chloe. You don't get it," Liam hissed, running a hand through his hair. "If I call her from a plane and break it off, she'll be heartbroken, yes, but then she'll be angry. An angry, wealthy woman with nothing to lose will unleash her lawyers. If you and the boys crash the wedding, it turns me into the poor man trapped in a terrible situation, forced to choose between 2 loves. Alara becomes the scorned, jealous fiancé who couldn't handle my difficult choice. She'll be too publicly humiliated to fight. She'll walk away." The malice, the calculated cruelty of it was sickening. He wasn't just avoiding legal consequences. He was weaponizing public shame against me. "And what about Marcus?" Chloe pressed. "Does he still think this will work?" Liam softened, his voice taking on a conspiratorial, friendly tone. "Marcus is running the logistics. He's my insurance. He's securing a hotel suite near the venue for you and the boys for the day. He's been my rock for 10 years. He knows how to get you in through the catering entrance before the ceremony." Marcus. My friend. The man who had taken me for coffee just last week to gently check on my stress levels. The man whose wedding I had helped design 2 years ago. The realization that he wasn't just complicit but the chief of staff of the betrayal was a shattering blow. He wasn't just covering for a friend, He was actively coaching the opposition on how to execute a public, soul-crushing ambush. He has to be in on it, Liam explained to Chloe. He's getting a massive, off-the-books commission from the merger, thanks to the connections Alara gave him. He owes me. He's happy to do it. He's the one who suggested the emotional leverage of the children at the altar. Said it would soften the room. I pressed the phone harder against the wall, absorbing every drop of this poison. The plan was not just about money, it was about destroying my dignity, reducing my successful, complex life to a single pathetic scene of abandonment. Chloe walked closer to Liam. And when the ceremony is supposed to start, you look up, you see us, you stop the ceremony, and you publicly declare that your heart belongs to your family. Exactly, Liam breathed. My heart belongs to my family. And then, 3 days later, after the corporate dust settles and the bonus is safely transferred, I file for a legal separation from Alara on the grounds of mutual incompatibility. I keep the bulk of my corporate assets, and we all live happily ever after. I stayed frozen until the last whisper of their conversation died down, and they retreated to the back of the cabin. The recording was full. I had everything. The financial motivation, the existence of the children, the full timeline of the lie, the theft of Chloe's inheritance, and the specific, damning involvement of Marcus in the wedding ambush plot. I backed away slowly, meticulously covering my tracks, ensuring no broken twigs or footprints were left in the damp earth. The coldness was now a shield, protecting the raw, exposed nerve that was my heart. I drove away from the cabin, not with speed, but with the ruthless, unwavering purpose of a tidal wave about to hit the shore. I drove until the sunrise bleached the sky, pulling into a nondescript highway motel 150 miles south of the cabin. I couldn't go home yet. I needed a neutral, safe space. I sat in the sterile motel room, the heavy curtains drawn, and played the audio back. Listening to the recording in the cold light of day was worse than hearing it in the dark. It confirmed the calculated, decade-long fraud that had been masquerading as a romantic partnership. At 7 a.m., I initiated the counterstrike. I called my attorney, Sarah Klein. Sarah was known in the city as a legal samurai, sharp, ruthless, and possessing an encyclopedic knowledge of financial law. Sarah, you need to clear your schedule for the next 48 hours. I have something that will blow up the entire wedding, his career, and every lie he's ever told. And I have it on tape. Within an hour, I was in Sarah's office, a modernist fortress of glass and steel that ironically looked exactly like the corporate environment Liam claimed to inhabit. Sarah listened to the entire 35-minute recording, her expression never changing, only her knuckles whitening as she gripped a pen. When it finished, she didn't offer sympathy, she offered strategy. Alara, this is not just grounds for annulment. It is evidence of criminal financial deception and conspiracy to defraud. The prenuptial agreement, which Liam signed, stipulates that any intentional, material non-disclosure of existing primary residence, dependents, or commingled assets exceeding $20,000 constitutes a breach, triggering the forfeiture clause. She slammed her pen down. The forfeiture clause, as I recall, gives the non-disclosing party, you, 90% of all assets and accumulated wealth in the partnership. The $5.3 million bonus, the investment properties, his stock options, it's all vulnerable. Our first move was to secure the financial target. The wire transfer for the merger bonus was scheduled for Friday morning, less than 48 hours away. We need an emergency injunctive order filed with the district court by end of business today, Sarah instructed, pulling in her top litigation associate, David. We are citing the recorded evidence and the documented financial fraud to freeze the incoming funds immediately upon transfer. We want that money protected from ever touching an account Liam controls. My role was tactical. I spent the next 12 hours giving Sarah and David every detail. The dates in the notebook, the property titles I could remember him mentioning, the full name of his company, and Marcus's involvement. Marcus is an accomplice, making him liable for civil damages in the tort of intentional infliction of emotional distress, Sarah noted coolly. will file a secondary claim against him, freezing his brokerage accounts and cutting off his commission until he testifies to the full scope of Liam's scheme. The final critical step was to control the narrative. We needed to ensure Liam would be in the city, humiliated and undefended when the news broke. We need to keep the wedding venue booked, Alara, Sarah insisted. We need him to think the plan is still moving forward. It maximizes his emotional leverage on Saturday, and it maximizes our legal leverage on Friday. I called the Vineyard venue. Hi, it's Alara Vance. I have some terrible news. Liam's mother has had a sudden severe medical emergency, and we need to postpone the entire event. We're keeping the date and the venue on hold, but we need to cancel the catering and guest confirmations immediately. A lie, but a compassionate, publicly acceptable lie, which made Liam's impending exposure all the more devastating. The wedding stage was still set, but the actors wouldn't know they were rehearsing for a tragedy. Thursday evening, the day before the bonus wire transfer, was the final reconnaissance mission. Liam was expected to leave the cabin late that night to return to the city for a final pre-wedding fitting on Friday morning. Sarah insisted I get a final, more public confirmation of Marcus's involvement and of the specific details of the plot. I drove the rental back to the Poconos, my internal state calm and lethal. I was no longer a distraught fiancé. I was an operative. I approached the cabin around 9 p.m. The mood inside was celebratory. Liam, Chloe, and Marcus were sitting around a roaring fire pit outside, toasting their success with cheap plastic cups. I crept through the woods, positioning myself close enough to the firelight to hear clearly, but far enough back that the shadows completely consumed me. To Friday, Marcus slurred, raising his cup. The wire clears, the injunction is avoided, and the bonus is secured. You're free, my man, Liam laughed, a sound that now sounded hollow and self-congratulatory. And I owe you, Marcus. That commission is yours, once the dust settles. Just make sure the entry is clean on Saturday. Chloe, you need to be crying, but focused. The kids need to look bewildered, not rehearsed. Chloe, clearly uneasy about the cruel performance, sipped her drink. It still feels unnecessarily cruel, Liam. Why involve the children in the public humiliation? Because it works, Liam said bluntly. It's the perfect deflection. Alara's pride will be destroyed. She'll never recover professionally from the scandal of being left at the altar for a secret family. She'll crawl away and we can tie up the loose ends without a fight. Marcus chimed in, his voice slightly more sober now. Yeah, Alara is too image conscious. She'll protect her firm's reputation by burying this quietly. She'll walk away from the joint assets to save face. It's what she does best, design a perfect facade. I took a final deep breath of the wood smoke and the mountain air. This was the final affirmation of his motive. Not just love for Chloe, but calculated, professional destruction of me. I slipped my phone out. This time, I didn't rely on audio. I needed visual confirmation. I used the night vision setting and took 3 high-resolution pictures. Liam, Chloe, and Marcus, all seated together, laughing conspiratorially around the fire pit, sealing their betrayal. I retreated, leaving them to their toxic celebration. The trap was set. Now I just needed to spring the wire. The next day, Friday, was a blur of legal maneuvers. I was in Sarah's office, signed and ready to witness the fall. At 10 a.m., the $5.3 million merger bonus was wired. At 10:02 a.m., the emergency injunctive order hit the corporate bank. The funds were instantly frozen, labeled Disputed Marital Assets, Court Order Attached. At 11 a.m., a court-martial and a certified process server arrived at Liam's city office, right in the middle of his victory meeting with his colleagues. Liam was served with the petition for annulment and the financial forfeiture summons. The documents didn't just request a divorce. They detailed the premeditated financial fraud, citing the specific clause in the prenup, and attached the full transcription of the audio recording, including his conversations with Chloe and Marcus. The immediate chaos was professionally devastating. His CEO, furious at the scandal and the immediate freezing of the merger funds he was counting on, fired Liam on the spot. The company's legal team, eager to distance themselves from the liability of a fraudulent employee, agreed to cooperate fully with Sarah's firm. Liam, stunned and professionally ruined, fled the office. He tried to call me 47 times. I let the phone ring, the sound a hollow victory anthem. He tried to call Marcus. Marcus, in turn, discovered his own accounts were frozen and his pending commission was impounded. The best man had become collateral damage. That evening, Liam found me, not at the apartment, but at a discreet, public coffee shop where Sarah's security detail ensured my safety. He looked like a cornered animal, his expensive suit rumpled, his face a roadmap of failure. "Elara," he pleaded, his voice a desperate, rasping whisper. "You don't understand. It was for the kids. It was always for Leo. I was trapped. I was going to tell you." I looked him in the eye, my gaze steady and emotionless. "You were trapped? You actively chose to use me, my connections, and my reputation for 10 years. You stole Chloe's inheritance to start a company, and then you planned to use the image of your 2 children to publicly humiliate me into financial silence." I slid a simple, white envelope across the table. It contained a copy of the new legal documents. "The wedding is canceled, not postponed. The venue was informed. The guests have been notified of your fraud. Your corporate life is over. The $5.3 million is legally frozen, and according to the agreement you signed, 90% of it, along with the apartment and your investment properties, is now mine." "You destroyed my life," he screamed, garnering the attention of the few remaining patrons. "No, Liam," I corrected him, leaning in. "I gave you enough rope to hang yourself, and you built a whole second life with it. I simply checked the receipt and tracked the mileage. This isn't revenge. This is the activation of a non-disclosure clause. Your life was never mine to destroy. It was yours, and you built it on sand." I walked out, leaving him to stare at the crushing truth of the documents. The confrontation was over. The litigation was just beginning. The Saturday of the scheduled wedding dawned gray and humid. I was supposed to be in a silk gown, gliding down an aisle. Instead, I was in a luxury spa suite, receiving a deep tissue massage while Maya handled the final damage control. The wedding that never happened became the city's greatest scandal. But the narrative belonged to me. Sarah, acting on my instructions, released a carefully worded statement to a few key high society blogs and financial news outlets. Elara Vance, the esteemed principal of Vance Design, has filed for annulment citing egregious, documented financial fraud and a decade-long pattern of concealment on the part of her former fiancé, Liam Hayes. Ms. Vance's robust prenuptial agreement, designed to protect her firm's assets, has successfully triggered a forfeiture clause, ensuring justice and full recovery of her losses. She asks for privacy as she processes this devastating personal and professional betrayal. By framing the issue as financial fraud and professional betrayal, rather than a simple case of a secret family, I controlled the perception. I was not the scorned woman. I was the sharp businesswoman who uncovered a corporate criminal and protected her assets. Liam's attempt to paint me as the heartless fiancé who persecuted the real family failed spectacularly. No one in our sophisticated circle cared about the children. They cared that he had tried to weaponize their connections for a fraudulent multi-million-dollar gain. Marcus became a social pariah, his involvement in the ambush plot exposed as a desperate, selfish act. I had one final, difficult conversation. I drove to the outskirts of the city, to a quiet suburban street where Chloe had relocated with her sons. I parked a block away and walked up to the house. Chloe opened the door, her eyes red-rimmed but hardened. She recognized me immediately. "I didn't think you'd ever show up," she said flatly. "I'm not here for an argument, Chloe. I'm here because our situation is linked, and I don't want your children to pay for Liam's crimes." I handed her an envelope containing documents. "The trust fund is secured." Sarah's firm ensured that a non-contestable trust was created from a portion of the liquidated investment properties. It's in the boys' names, and Liam can't touch it, claim it, or use it as leverage. I suggest you change your number and sever all contact with him. He is a financial parasite, and he will only try to drain you again." She stared at the documents, then back at me. "You didn't have to do this." "Yes, I did," I said. "He wanted to take my money and ruin my name. He wanted to leave you unstable and dependent. I protected myself, and in doing so, I protected your children. Now go build a clean life." I left, feeling a sense of closure, not victory. The war was over, but the rebuilding had just begun. 6 weeks later, the final decree of annulment was granted. The terms were exactly as Sarah had predicted. 90% of all joint liquid assets, including the $5.3 million bonus, were transferred to my control. The penthouse was sold, and I took the capital to purchase a smaller, more intimate industrial loft, a space untainted by Liam's presence. I was wealthy, secure, and officially free. The original honeymoon, the luxury cruise from Venice to Istanbul, followed by 2 weeks in the Greek Isles, had been fully paid for and was non-refundable. I didn't cancel it. I elevated it. I booked the owner's penthouse suite on the cruise line. The one Liam had claimed was too expensive. I cashed in all the unused wedding funds and the gift money I had diligently returned to guests and booked a first-class ticket. I brought Maya. The day we flew out, I felt an almost euphoric lightness. I wasn't running away. I was stepping into the future I had paid for with 10 years of my life and a multi-million-dollar legal battle. We landed in Venice, the city of love, the place where Liam had proposed with his beautifully crafted lie. Standing on the Rialto Bridge, watching the water glitter, I felt no sadness, only profound, liberating indifference. Maya raised a glass of Bellini as we boarded the ship, to the greatest personal finance victory in the history of annulments, and to Alara, who traded a mediocre fiancé for a spectacular financial portfolio. To checking the receipts, I amended, clinking her glass. The cruise was a detox for the soul. I spent my days reading on the private balcony of my suite, drafting new proposals for my firm, and simply enjoying the silence. I learned to appreciate the sunset over the deep blue sea, without the pressure of having to perform the role of the perfect fiancé. In the ship's library, I found a book on ancient military strategy. I realized my own strategy: wait for the enemy to commit their full force, the bonus the wedding, then cut off their supply line, the injunction, and attack their morale, the exposure, was fundamentally sound. I had treated the betrayal not as a love problem, but as a business problem, and I had won. The true moment of vindication came in the Greek islands. We were staying in a beautiful villa carved into the cliffs of Santorini, overlooking the caldera. The light was phenomenal, and I was sitting on the terrace, sketching a new concept for my firm, a project inspired by the whitewashed Cycladic architecture. I realized I hadn't thought of Liam in 3 days. He had finally evaporated from the background noise of my consciousness. That evening, I received the final email from Sarah, marked confidential and urgent. "Alara, I have the final update. Liam attempted to file a ridiculous counterclaim based on duress regarding the prenup. It was dismissed instantly. The court has authorized the immediate release of the remaining frozen assets. The matter is closed. He has been ordered to pay all legal fees. His financial existence is now negligible. You are fully and irrevocably solvent. Enjoy the Aegean Sea." I closed the laptop, letting the cool evening air wash over me. I didn't cheer. I didn't call Maya. I simply walked to the railing and looked out at the vast expanse of the sea and the fiery orange of the sunset. The feeling was not triumph, but an immense, quiet, and satisfying peace. The 10 years of energy I had unknowingly invested in a ghost were now returned to me, multiplied, secured, and purified. I thought about the man Liam had been. Handsome, charming, a great liar. I understood now that his success was his true love, and I was merely a feature in his narrative of ambition. The highest form of betrayal is not cheating. It is the cynical misuse of a person's faith for personal gain. He had misused my love, my trust, and my social capital. But he had fundamentally underestimated me. He had seen the perfect fiancé, the detail-oriented designer, But he hadn't seen the financial strategist, the woman capable of turning evidence of heartbreak into a weapon of legal and financial destruction. The dream trip, the supposed honeymoon, had become a pilgrimage to my own independence. Every ancient ruin, every sun-drenched beach, was a celebration of my freedom. I was a single woman, standing on the edge of the world with millions in the bank, a clear conscience, and a completely unwritten future. It has been 18 months since the annulment. My life is unrecognizable, yet perfectly aligned. I moved my firm into the new loft space. The aesthetic is clean, honest, and built on verifiable foundations, a deliberate contrast to the illusion I once lived in. I've started a new initiative, specializing in sustainable, transparent building practices, which I've dubbed the Integrity Project. I occasionally see updates on Liam's life through the grapevine. His career is dead, his name a toxic liability in consulting. He tried to reconcile with Chloe, but she wisely refused, protected by the trust I had established. He is now scraping by on regional contract work, forever paying off the debts he amassed. Marcus, the best man, is a cautionary tale of corporate malfeasance. The final piece of physical evidence, the original, crinkled Hickory Creek mercantile receipt, sits framed on my desk, not as a reminder of the pain, but as a testament to the power of observation. It reminds me that every massive lie starts with a small, easily dismissed detail. My success wasn't due to luck. It was due to the simple act of paying attention. I have started dating again. The approach is entirely different now. I don't look for the spectacle or the facade of success. I look for consistency, for verified stories, and for people who smell like their own life, not like wood smoke and expensive, stale cologne. I learned the most valuable lesson of my life in that cold, dark cabin 200 miles away. The cost of ignoring your intuition is often far higher than the price of a full investigation. I was almost a footnote in a massive financial fraud, but instead, I wrote the final chapter. I am Alara Vance, successful architect, astute investor, and now, a woman who knows exactly how to tear down a faulty structure and build something enduring in its place. I got my money, I got my freedom, and most importantly, I got my life back. Built now not on the sandy foundation of a lie, but on the unshakable bedrock of truth and resilience. The golden cage is empty, and the architect has flown.